This slideshow returns to North America to talk about the Native Americans' cultures. Now, as we all know, North America is an extremely large, area, it's a continent, and and we can't classify all the various peoples of it as one same group. Unfortunately, the Europeans, colonizers, tended to deal with it that way. Uh, but we know there's a diversity of groups with a diversity of languages. Now, as far as the languages go, it's interesting. It's hard to tell, quite frankly, where how to organize them and where exactly they come from. Now, as I've discussed before, North America wasn't inhabited by hominins till about 13, 14,000, maybe 15,000 years ago. Um, and so they came in from Asia, but none of these languages really have any similarities with those languages. There are some small ones, um, but they just tend to be their own branch, and they seem to or branches, and they've evolved here. Um, Now, one of the problems with North America versus Mesoamerica is we have no writing. So what we know basically is of European accounts of the languages, and what are left of them. And there was there were several hundred languages when the Europeans got here. Now there's, I don't know, 20 or something that were left speakers, or no, I shouldn't say 20 speakers, but 20 different languages that still have speakers in them, a small amount. And what the Europeans did to the Native Americans is just tragic, and we lost a lot because of how they were treated. And we all know the stories of Europeans. First of all, had guns. Secondly, they had horses that were introduced here. And then we all know the story about the disease blankets. Intentional or otherwise, the simple fact is that Europeans domesticated animals a very long time before they were anywhere domesticated in North America, and not many were domesticated in North America. Uh, and they lived beside these animals. The animals frequently lived on the first floor, and the people lived on the second floor. And because of that, we Europeans caught many diseases and then had many immunities for them, none of which the North American Indians had immunities for. And so they got, wiped out pretty bad by these diseases, as well as outright hostilities and straight out, um, racism against the American Indians. Um, and this is just quite unfortunate, and we can go into this, but I'm sure we're all familiar with the stories. But the best we can do is hope to study them and preserve them and appreciate them. Now, this map here is sort of a snapshot of different languages and regions. They change over time. I do want to point out that just because these are shared languages doesn't necessarily mean that these everybody within that language group was a coherent, you know, political organization or social organization or tribe or what have you. They just share the same, broadly the same languages, which, back to the languages, interestingly enough, can be pretty diverse from one another. It's not like you learn one and you can just fall into the second language quite easily. They're difficult languages to learn, and they would the areas and would change over time. But here just gives you an idea of some of the language groups, and we see on the right a chronology, and we have it going back to about, what does it say, about 1300 or 1150 BC. As I said in earlier lectures, these dates are going to change dramatically in your lifetime. It's unpublished, but I know for a fact that much earlier artifacts have been found in the West, and there's a good chance, and mark my words on this, although you won't have to be tested on it, and you don't have to know it. I think in your lifetime they're going to find pre-Homo sapien tools in these areas. In fact, as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure they have been found, but there's just the problem of dating them. But I think that'll happen in your lifetime, and that's very exciting that we'll get some pre-Homo saps in the Americas. But in any case, here's the traditional chronology on the right. Um, and here we have some of the groups that were, lived in the American Southwest. And we're going to look at the Southwest today. We already looked at the Mississippian and Eastern cultures. We'll look at the Southwest, which has really impressive art and architecture. And also these regions, they have sort of fuzzy edges, which is good because they change over time. They ebb and flow. Now, a lot of these have been called Anasazi. Now, it's important you should know that Anasazi is not the name of any group or tribe. It was adopted by anthropologists in 1927, actually, because basically the people to the north of the Southwest there, just referred to them as the enemy. These people as the enemy, and so that's what the Europeans called them, the Anasazi, but that's not what they called themselves. So just know it's a real word, but it's not. Nobody ever called themselves the enemy, right? Of course, only your enemies called you the enemy. So just know that. And here are some of the real words for these groups: the Hohokam, the Sinagua, the Mogollon, etc. Now, there is a couple classes of evidence that are quite important for this area. First of all, the petroglyphs. And these are, what I want you to know about petroglyphs is that, first of all, they're carved into stone or pecked into stone. And so they're pretty permanent. And we get a variety of depictions, but primarily those of animals, humans as well. And here we see a hunting scene with the man on the right with the bow and arrow. I say man, who knows what gender that person is. And the animals up top and in a herd of some sort. And these petroglyphs are well preserved for us, and of various types and various places. I study petroglyphs a fair amount these days because of some research that I came across in Crete. And, they're hard to figure out what's going on. It's hard to make specific statements of them, just generalizations. But they seem to be, obviously somewhat sacred places or indeed important places. Why do it otherwise? However, what that importance is, we simply don't know. But there is a lot of them throughout the American Southwest, and I hope you've all had a chance to go down there. And if not, please go. And you're just, there's petroglyphs and petrographs, as we'll see in a moment, all over the place. So we have this depiction of artwork. We also have the petrographs. Now, the difference is these are painted on. These are not pecked or carved. And here we see some humanoid figures here. So these are also, artistic manifestations of the cultures we have down there. One of the really amazing things about these cultures are the pottery they produced. And this stuff is excellent pottery, just really, really well made. Unfortunately, it's very popular on the illegal art market, and so a lot of these things get dug up and sold, unfortunately. And once that happens, we've lost their context, and they have little meaning other than aesthetic, beauty. Although they are quite beautiful vessels, as we see here with these dark reds and blacks applied to the pottery that's highly burnished, that is to say polished, and gives it a nice shine. And these were very well made pots, and these can be used to date. Just like this is true in any pottery producing culture, they will the pottery changes style over time and over place, and scholars use it during excavations to figure out what dates they have when they are excavating. And if you ever decide to do some archaeology, you'll spend, and it's a period that's producing ceramics, you'll spend astronomical amount of time studying these. and piecing them back together like a 3D jigsaw puzzle. And they're really important for us for knowing the dates. The seriation studies, as I say, the studies and types and chronologies would be developed before we had absolute dates, and so this was of primary importance for the longest time. And then, once we had the absolute dates from carbon-14, etc., we could nail them down. But in the Southwest especially, there was really spectacular pottery production. Now, back to our map. Here, this is more of a general one we're going to, for cultures we're going to talk about today. The Hohokam culture is in Arizona, maybe goes into New Mexico a little bit. Mogollon is also to the more New Mexico and northern Mexico. We'll look at that one site there called we'll look at the cliff dwellings nearby. And then what's called the Ancestral Pueblo, which is shown, and we'll look at the two sites there of Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon. Oh, I misspoke. We won't look at the Gala ones. We'll look at the ones just in the Ancestral Pueblo. By the way, Ancestral Pueblo is a term that was decided to be used rather than Anasazi when people realized this wasn't appropriate. So that's sort of a generic term that's used for those people. And let's look first at Mesa Verde, a really spectacular archaeological site in the Southwest. If you haven't been down to the Southwest, I strongly urge you when you're there to try to visit these sites. They are extraordinarily impressive. One of the ones I want to show you soon, Mesa Verde. It's been, archaeologists have said it's it's equivalent to the pyramids or the in Egypt, or the one at Teotihuacan in Mexico, and other in Stonehenge and other sites like this. These are really, really spectacular cliff dwellings. On the right, just shows you a map. And the only reason I show that to you is to show you there's a bunch of these different cliff dwellings. I'm just going to show you a couple of them, but there are lots of them. Here's probably the most famous, and this is called Archaic Paleo-Indian, and we see the dates up there. And this is built into a rock cavity way above ground. And I'll show you a shot of it in a moment that gives you more of that feel. But I want you to pay attention. In addition to the square houses, we have these kivas out front. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 that we see there. And so these seem to be in the front of the cave, and then behind them, the dwellings. And here's another shot of it, a prettier shot, but just to give you an idea of, these are 3-storied buildings, made out of stone and field stone and mud brick, etc. And they were way high up on the cliff sides, so they were very defensible. Here we see a close-up of it, and I show you this just to give you an idea of the size. With the people there, so these kivas were, once again, these were sort of some sort of sacred room that they just had ceremonies in. We're not too certain what was going on, but we discussed them before, and this is just an architectural element that reoccurs in the architecture of the Southwest. And we see here a slide sort of looking down slope from it, and you can see that it's high up. I'll show you a better picture of the next cliff dwelling. But these are very defensible areas, and these are sheer cliffs going down below. So these would have been hard to get to, and they had to have some either rope ladders coming down from the top, or foothills or footsteps cut into the rocks. And now let's move over to the Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. Um, there are a whole bunch of sites in the Chaco Canyon. It's been the object of study by specialists for decades and decades and decades. And we're just going to talk about one site, Pueblo Bonito. And here we see a couple aerial shots of it. And we can see it's semicircular in shape. And there's in the central area, there's sort of a horseshoe-shaped open plaza, but it has kivas put into it, and then rooms around the outside, a whole bunch of what we call agglutinative architecture. That is architecture one beside the other, with people sharing walls, living in this city. I visited this a few years ago, and apparently, prior to New York City becoming a major urban center, this was the largest city in North America. Now, that's not to say in the Americas. When we get down to Mexico, we're going to see some really large centers there. But for North America, this was a pretty big place. I just want to point out, too, if you can see better on the right-hand slide, you see that roof, the canyon collapse there. That happened, obviously, after people lived there, and it collapsed and destroyed parts of the dwellings. And here we can get a plan of it. And you can see just the multitude of rooms, just these aren't just, this isn't just a little village. There's a lot of people. And these kivas, for ceremonial purposes, there's just tons of them. Perhaps each family had their own. I mean, I don't know, but there is a lot of them here, but they are surrounded by what are apparently the houses for dwellings. And here is just another photograph of them, and you can see that a lot of them are grouped together here. And I'm just showing you some photographs, but pay attention to this. The nice squared structures as well. This is very good architecture, and notice the steps leading up. The fact that these are still standing really shows what impressive builders these were. And that's just another shot of it. Skip over that. This is fun. These are the doorways that line up from room to room to room to room. So there's architectural planning, and that's something interesting. Sure, parts of Pueblo Bonito are added on to over time. It's not all built at once, but it's built in large chunks when there are additions to it. And we can see that they have these doorways line up quite well. So what that specifically means, I have no idea, but it does show that there's some planning. City planning, not just everybody doing their own thing with their houses. This is just another kiva there. I just want to point out how large this kiva is, and I mean it's massive compared to the other ones. So these things were important community centers for, once again, we're not sure, but there are. These kivas are a motif, architectural motif of the Southwest, and there's big ones at Pueblo Bonito. And here's just another shot of it. Now let's move over to the very famous site of Montezuma's Castle. Just like Mesa Verde, it is built into a cliff. And it's nice, mud brick there. And some stone into this naturally built cliff. We can see that that if they came from the top, they would have to descend down by rope of some sort, or climb up from the bottom. And there are footholds we can see in these in the bottom here. And in fact, there's even some structures cut into the wall here. And there, that gives you an idea of the scale. Once again, really, you should try to go here if you ever have a chance. It is just really impressive. Now, I didn't get inside, get up to it. I don't know how one does. I got some photographs off Google for us, but I don't know how they were taken other than by professionals. And you can't see it here, but there are sort of small cutout dwellings down here, and there are footholds, so you could climb up to this if you were so inclined and intrepid. But this, these cliff dwellings are in addition to these open air sites, and they seem to be, if nothing else, quite defensible. Don't know how they got the material up there to build it. Perhaps they had ladders, and they must have had ladders going up, but some sort of scaffolding or what have you. But they're really, really impressive urban dwellings. And once again, they have their kivas, and we can see, this one's interesting on the right here, where it's sort of falling in. We can see on the bottom that one of the walls is sort of collapsing in. But what it does do is it shows us the different levels of the architecture and how the construction is. What the construction is, how it is formed. And so these are pretty impressive pieces of architecture, and once again are very repetitive throughout the Southwest.